In Howling 7, there's a new moon rising, but is it a full moon? Because if it's not, maybe there's just a slither of justification available for us to skip this movie on a technicality. We're going to have to do it, aren't we? Hi guys, so a few months ago I did pledge to review all of the Howling movies, and so here we are. Yesterday I spent an hour and a half watching New Moon Rising on a very small square screen on my phone. I certainly wasn't going to buy this movie or spend money renting it. I managed to find a free version, luckily, on YouTube, so go and check that out if you're interested. This was directed by a guy called Clive Turner. You won't have heard of him because he was a first-time director when he did this, and as it turns out, a final-time director. Nobody wanted to hire him again after Howling 7. Go figure. You won't find much information about this guy, period, when it comes to the movie industry, because he only really gained a few small acting credits here and there in addition to his one-time directing. He got his foot in the door with Howling 3. So he's an Australian guy, and that particular entry in the franchise was set in and filmed in Australia. So that's how he got in. And then in Howling 4, he took on a very small acting role. Not that I remember him being in it. And in Howling 5, he also starred in that film, and I just about barely remember his face from that movie. But for some reason, when it came to Howling 7, he just managed to get the keys to the whole thing. He was allowed to write this one, edit it, star in it, and when I try and think of why he was allowed to do all this, I can only think that maybe he just offered to do the whole film for 10 cents, and somebody in a studio somewhere said, well, okay, if you think you can do that, then go for it. So the story for this, we've got a guy called Ted, played by Turner. He travels from Australia to America because he's heard there's a job going in this small American town. Oh yeah, this is a horror comedy, technically, so that could be a joke, maybe, rather than a mistake. But we know, the audience, that he's there for different reasons. He's actually there because he's investigating something, and we don't know what, for quite a long time in this, but it turns out that there's a werewolf in the town. Of course there is. We just don't know until very late on whether the werewolf is Ted or whether it's one of the townsfolk, and I won't spoil it for you. Now, I'm going to give a grain of credit to the movie here because we get references to previous Howling movies, and that doesn't normally happen in this series. In fact, this is the first time it's happened since Howling 2 decided to include a couple of characters related to characters from Howling 1. But I think Turner's only doing it here to gain his movie a little bit of credibility, and I'm very cynical as to how he's gone about referencing those previous movies, because he only goes back to Howling 4 and 5, which coincidentally are the only two movies that he just happened to be as an actor, and so he was able to get an actress from Howling 4 to come back briefly for this one, and also an actress from Howling 5 to come back. Let's be honest, if you could go back and use any of the stories from the previous Howling movies, you would link to Howling 1, you know, the really good Howling movie. You wouldn't go back to Howling 4, the original Nightmare, or Howling 5, the Rebirth, or whatever it was called. And also, it's very noticeable when you're watching this that there are certain exposition scenes where characters are explaining the history of what happened in Howling 4 and 5, but they do it in a very show, not tell kind of way. So this movie sort of becomes like a clip show at times, which is really frustrating. We must get like 10-15 minutes of old clips from old movies. They're not given to you in one big bulk. They're sort of spread out a little bit, but still, this is a 90-minute movie, and I reckon 15 minutes of it is clips from older Howling movies. Plus, when you see the clips from Howling 4, it's the only time in this you see money on the screen, really. So we see explosions and fires from Howling 4. We see a pretty cool transformation effect, but when you see this, you'll instantly think to yourself, well, we haven't seen anything like this from the Howling 7 footage. All of that is just mostly characters larking about and, you know, dialogue scenes, no actual scenes where proper money has been spent. It's just when they put the Howling 4 clips in, that's the only time. The werewolf effects in this are dire, with a capital D. So whenever the werewolf's chasing somebody in this, they always show the action from the werewolf's point of view because their identity is not meant to have been revealed yet. That's fair enough. But what they do is, during these very, very brief chase sequences, if you can call them that, they cover the screen in sepia, which is mainly to block you from seeing the action because they know it looks shit. Clive Turner's trying to stop you from seeing it as best he can, so you've just got to sort of peer through the red to see what's going on, and you can just about make out somebody running away usually, but they run in a really stupid fashion. Now, if I was running away from a werewolf, I would be sprinting so fast you wouldn't see me for the wind. I mean, I'm not Usain Bolt, but faced with certain death, I could really leg it some, and I could probably keep that up for like a good 3 or 4 minutes. But people in bad horror movies do this really pathetic run sometimes where they're just running really slow, and then they'll turn around and go, and then they'll run a little bit more, and then they'll turn around again and go, and then it's like, why are you turning around? What, to see if you've lost the werewolf? How would you do that running at that pace? Later in the film, we finally get to see an actual werewolf transformation. At this point, the identity of the werewolf has been outed, I guess. But this transformation is just horrible, easily the worst in the franchise. So how they've done it is they've taken a human face and then used some kind of really basic 90s software to sort of stretch the face out so that it becomes like an angry werewolf somehow. And I guess they've added in some hairs for the werewolf face, but it just looks horrible. It reminds me of those apps you can get where you take like a picture of somebody in your family or friendship circle and just stretch them out a little bit, and then you'll take a picture, put it on Facebook and be like, look what we did to Chloe, we stretched her out. And that's what they've done in this movie. They just used something like that, done a bit of stretching, and that creates a werewolf. But it's, I mean, if Joe Dante was dead, he'd be rolling in his grave watching this film. Possibly one day when he is dead, he will do a little roll. I will say that Ted is quite a likeable character in this. He does say a lot of things that are genuinely funny. It did cross my mind that I would like to hang out in a bar with Ted. I think that would be kind of fun. The trouble is, when this movie gets into its darker portion, Clive Turner can't come out of that jovial state of being. So his way of acting starts to look a little bit amateurish towards the end of this. Most of the people around him weren't actual proper actors in Howling 7. So this was shot in a place called Pioneer Town. It's a very small town in California with about 500 people in it. And apparently film production companies have often gone to this town whenever they need a kind of Western setting, a certain look. So the people of this town, obviously well used to Hollywood knocking on their doorstep. It just so happens that on this particular occasion, Clive Turner turned up with cameras and actually asked the local people to be in the movie. It was their big chance to shine, to be in front of the cameras, and I guess most of them took up his offer. What they got paid, no idea, probably a couple of bottles of beer or something. They don't disgrace themselves, all these people. I mean, we're not talking cameos here. These are people who play very noticeable characters in the movie who are front and centre in a lot of scenes and have a lot of dialogue to do. But they do it fine for the most part, but it's not like they have to act that much, if you know what I mean. The two girls who come in from Howling 4 and 5, they are proper actresses who obviously would have been paid a decent fee. I've got mixed feelings on those two. The girl from 4, I wish she'd been in this one a lot more than she is. The girl from 5, though, she's dreadful. She just can't act. Like, there's a really crucial scene late on in this where she's sat on a settee holding a shotgun, and it's one of the most important moments in this story, and she's so flat. I'm just looking at the screen shouting, act, god damn it, act, come on, raise the tempo. So, you know, to look at these two girls from 4 and 5, yeah, they're both good looking women, but in terms of acting ability, the girl from 4, I'd take her all day long. We've also got a priest character and a cop character. These two might be genuine actors. They play substantial roles in this. They crop up every now and again, and they only ever seem to be in scenes together, a bit like how Loomis and Mika are only ever in each other's scenes in Halloween 4. But when the priest and the cop appear, it's usually because some exposition is needed. They usually just sit and talk about old Howling movies. So whenever you see the priest and the cop in Howling 7, definitely a good time to go and put the kettle on or let the dog into the garden, because you're not going to miss much. Musically, I guess the film is okay. There's lots of country music, rodeo stuff. You know, it's not my favourite type of music, but whenever I do hear country music, I do tend to like it. It's just very out of place in a horror film about werewolves. I get that this is a horror comedy, but still, I listen to some of the music in this and I just feel sad, like I'm wasting my time watching totally the wrong movie for me. The things I do for a couple of views on YouTube, eh? But I think we're done here for today. Let's get to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score I'm going to give Howling New Moon Rising. It doesn't feel like there's anything in this bag. What could that mean? Oh, look at this. Just half a bloody axe out of 5. That is a terrible score. Because it's a terrible movie, I don't recommend it. I'm glad that it's over and I can just move on to the next thing, which sadly is another Howling sequel. We've got one more to go. I hope it's at least better than this one. Until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.